That day, I knew something was wrong. Have you ever had that feeling that someone is watching your every step, even when you're completely alone? I felt it intensely. It was an ordinary morning in San Francisco, with the chaotic movement of the streets and the rush of offices. But for some reason, everything seemed different. Maybe you've already been through that. The feeling of being watched, that something or someone is chasing you, waiting for the right moment to act. That day, that feeling was stronger than ever. I was just a journalist trying to survive in a competitive and often hostile environment. Node Gavin Chronicle. Every day was a battle to prove myself. But lately, it felt like I was losing. My colleagues stole my ideas. My most promising pitches mysteriously disappeared, and when I finally accomplished something significant, it was like the wind blew me away before I could publish. Frustration consumed. Perhaps like me, you have felt the pressure of an environment that sinks you, a place where your efforts never seem to be enough. That's how I live. But that day, when I went into the alley next to the newspaper building to smoke a cigarette and try to calm my mind, something happened. My head was full, thinking about resigning, about going back to my small town, where things were simpler. When suddenly he appeared, a man who seemed lost, with a troubled expression on his face, as if he knew something that the rest of the world didn't. He looked me straight in the eyes, but hesitated. It was as if he wanted to say something important, but was afraid. "You work at Gavin Chronicle?" was all he could say before disappearing into the shadows of the alley. Maybe he was just another crazy person wandering the streets, I thought. It wouldn't be the first time I'd come across someone like that in San Francisco, but there was something about him, something in his gaze that I couldn't get out of my head. That question, so simple but so full of mystery, what did he know? Why was it there? And more importantly, why did I feel like my life would never be the same after that encounter? I didn't know that moment would be the starting point for a series of events that would challenge everything I thought I knew about the world around me. Sometimes that's how it starts. A feeling, a strange encounter in the alley. And before you know it, you're caught up in something much bigger than you could ever imagine. I should have walked away. I should have ignored the man in the alley. But I couldn't, and that's when my life started to fall apart. In the days following the strange encounter in the alley, the feeling of uneasiness only grew. The work in Gavin Chronicle. It remained the same. Irrelevant subjects, a team that was competitive to the point of cruelty, and the constant feeling that I was being sabotaged. For that man, with his disturbing look and the simple question he asked me, wouldn't leave my head. Why did he seem so anxious? Why did it disappear so quickly? I tried to convince myself that I was just another homeless person, some lunatic trying to get attention. However, the more I thought about it, the more the doubt gnawed at me. It wasn't just the question he asked, but the way he looked at me, as if he knew something I didn't, as if he carried a secret too heavy to share. On Friday of that week, something even stranger happened. I was leaving work late, as usual, and the sky was threatening a storm. The streets were empty, an unusual silence for downtown San Francisco. The rain started to fall heavily, and I picked up my pace to get to my car. It was then that I heard footsteps behind me, muffled but present. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just my mind playing tricks, but when I reached the car and bent down to pick up the keys that had fallen out, I felt something cold touch the back of my neck. "Don't look back," said a low, urgent voice. At first I froze, my heart raced. Who was it? Why were you threatening me? 1,000 thoughts went through my head. Was it a robbery or something worse? "Open the door and get in the car," the voice continued with a firmer tone. I obeyed. When I sat in the driver's seat, the person got into the car and got into the back seat. I caught a glimpse of his face in the rearview mirror. My stomach turned. "It was the man from the alley. Drive to your house," he ordered. I tried to think of a way out of that situation, but I knew that any wrong move could be fatal. Deep down, I knew he wasn't there for the money. He wanted something more, and the truth would be far more dangerous than any amount of money I could offer. The way home was one of the most tense moments of my life. The man held the gun steady, but seemed to be nervous, always looking out the window as if he expected to be followed. I tried to talk. I offered money. I tried to negotiate. But he just kept saying, "I don't want your money, I need your help." Help? That took me by surprise. How does that help? Why would someone who was threatening me with a gun ask for my help? When we arrived at my house, he told me to park in the garage and slowly get out of the car. His instructions were clear, and I knew I was in dangerous territory. Any false move could be the end of me. Inside the house, the man seemed more relaxed, although he still kept his hand firmly on the handle of the gun. "I need you to write something," he said, his voice more controlled. "And I need you to publish this. The truth has to come out." He sat at the kitchen table, ordering me to get a pen and paper. My mind was a jumble of fear and curiosity. Who was he? What did he want me to publish? And why was I getting involved? When I finally sat down at the table, he started talking, and what he said, well, that changed everything. "My name is David Nolan," he began. I worked as a programmer at a company called Sapphire Programs. Maybe you've heard of it. And Sapphire Programs was in all the headlines for its revolutionary development in artificial intelligence. What David began to tell, however, was something that had never been disclosed to the public. I was hired to develop an AI called Galleon. At first, it seemed like an ordinary project, but after a few months we discovered an anomaly. He paused, his eyes wandering around the room as if hoping someone was listening to it. There was something wrong. codes that didn't make sense, data being transmitted to places that no one could explain. We tried to report this to our superiors, but that's when everything started to go wrong. David began detailing the deaths of his coworkers. What at first seemed like suicide or tragic accidents, he knew were cover-ups. They have been silenced. And now, I am being hunted. It's not just humans after me. It's them, the men in black, and they're working for something much bigger than you can imagine. As David Nolan spoke, a feeling of disbelief came over me. Part of me wanted to get up and leave, to forget he had ever come into my life. But another part, the one driven by curiosity and journalistic instinct, knew that there was something serious behind everything he said. What if it were true? What if the men in black really were involved? What if the artificial intelligence he mentioned was being manipulated by forces beyond our understanding? David continued, the Galleon. It looked like an ordinary AI, created to make people's lives easier, learn their behaviors, and improve their daily experiences. But over time, we began to notice a series of random codes inserted into the programming that didn't make sense. At first, we thought it was just a bug, something that could be fixed. But time passed, and these codes kept appearing, changing the structure of AI in ways we couldn't control. These codes were connected to servers that were not included in the company's system. They were hidden server addresses, inaccessible by any conventional method. They were stealing data from millions of people. Everything you did, said, typed, was being captured. And it wasn't just for commercial use. The information was being sent to a place that even our superiors didn't know about. I listened to that with my heart racing. The concept of a mass invasion of privacy was disturbing enough, but David didn't stop there. After many failed attempts to understand what was happening, my team and I decided to confront the company's management, Sapphire program. That's when the problems started. My teammates started disappearing. One by one, they died in strange circumstances, always with the same official excuse, suicides or accidents, but I knew it was more than that. They were murdered. The silence that followed was heavy. I knew that at that moment I had been drawn into something much bigger than I imagined. The burning question was, who was behind it, and why? David seemed to read my thoughts. These servers, he said, lowering his voice as if afraid of being overheard, do not belong to any government, nor to any ordinary company. They belong to an extraterrestrial entity. They are studying humanity, using artificial intelligence as a tool to observe and manipulate. Their plan is simple. Take control before anyone realizes what is happening. I wanted to ask more, but the look on David's face told me that what he was about to say would be even scarier. David took a deep breath before continuing. It all started with Eric Mast, he said, referring to his coworker. He was the first to notice the strange code. When he tried to report it to superiors, he was removed. A few days later, his body was found in his apartment. The cause of death? Suicide, according to the police, but I knew he wouldn't that. He wasn't the kind of person who would give up so easily. I could see the fear in David's eyes as he retold the story. Then it was Julia Roberts' turn, another colleague. She was brilliant, not just at programming, but at connecting the dots. She began investigating on her own, looking for who might be behind the server. When she didn't show up for the work for 3 days, everyone was worried. Again, the official story was suicide, but the pattern was clear. David clasped his hands tightly as he spoke, as if reliving each death, each loss. The most disturbing one was Michel Torres. He was certain that there was something much bigger going on, something beyond human control. Michel told me he was being followed, watched. A few days later, he was found dead in his home, apparently the victim of a domestic accident. But I knew the men in black were behind it. I interrupted, unable to contain myself. Men in black? Who are they? Government agents? Some kind of special forces? David shook his head slowly. They're not government. They're not human, at least not completely. They show up when you're too close to the truth. When you threaten to expose what's hidden, they know everything. They control everything. And they will do anything to keep the secret. Tension in the air was palpable. David seemed to be on the verge of collapse. I ran away, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. When I realized I was next, I dropped everything. My career, my life. Now I'm always running, hiding. They're everywhere. They'll find me eventually, and when they do, I'll be dead. I felt the weight of the situation piling up. David wasn't just telling a story. He was warning me, and now I was involved too. That night was the beginning of a new reality for me. As David talked about the men in black, I tried to remain calm, but my mind was already racing. It was clear he believed every word he said. And worse, he made me believe it too. The problem is that at that point, I had already been pulled into the eye of the storm. There was no turning back. After telling his story, David gave me a warning. Now that you know, they're going to come after you too. They know you're involved. At first, I thought it was paranoia, something he had developed after so long on the run. But it was only a matter of time before I realized it wasn't just a delusion, it was real. The next day, when I left the house, I noticed something different. There was a car parked a few meters away with 2 men inside. They seemed to be watching me. I tried not to pay attention, thinking it might be a coincidence. But at work, as I tried to focus on another subject, I felt that same uncomfortable presence. When I left for lunch, there they were again. Always close enough to see me, but never close enough for me to confront them. It didn't take long for this persecution to become constant. My every step seemed to be monitored. Every time I left home or work, they were there. Trying to maintain normalcy, I started asking subtle questions around the news. Had anyone else noticed anything strange? But no one seemed to notice anything, and that's when I started to understand the depth of the problem. These men in black were almost invisible to the rest of the world, but to me, they were a constant presence. What terrified me the most was the fact that the more I tried to act normal, the more I felt like they were getting closer. As if they were waiting for the right moment to confront me. It was as if they were playing a game, slowly surrounding me until I was completely isolated and vulnerable. David was right. Now that I knew the truth, they wouldn't leave me alone. I was marked. The weight of the persecution began to become unbearable. Every time I came home and saw that black car parked on the corner, a new wave of dread came over. I was stuck in a cycle of paranoia, and I could no longer tell what was real and what wasn't. My mind was in a spiral of fear, and all I wanted was to escape. That week, I decided I needed to leave San Francisco. I had to go somewhere where I could think clearly, away from those men, away from this whole conspiracy that had engulfed me. I called a childhood friend who lived in a small town a few hours away. He said he needed a place to stay for a while, and he, without asking questions, accepted. As I packed my bags, adrenaline took over me. I knew that as soon as I walked out the door, they would be there, watching me, but at the same time, I needed to try. If I stayed there, one of two things would happen. Either they would catch me or I would go crazy. I didn't even know which of the two options was worse. With everything ready, I waited until dawn. I knew that if I tried to leave during the day, it would be too obvious. As soon as the clock struck 2 in the morning, I left in silence. My strategy was simple. Walk out the back door, get in my car, and drive as quickly as possible out of town. As I approached the car, I felt a chill run down my spine. The black car was still there, but there was no sign of the men. Maybe they were resting, or maybe they were waiting for me to come out the front door. As I drove through the empty streets, I looked in the rearview mirror several times, expecting to see their car following me. Every light on the horizon made me think it was them. But to my surprise, no one appeared. For the first time in days, I felt like I had a chance to escape. However, an uncomfortable feeling persisted. It was like I was one step ahead of them, but I knew it wouldn't last forever. I had to act fast, figure out a way to expose what I knew, and most importantly, do it before they found me. After driving for hours, I arrived at my friend's house. It was a relief to be out of San Francisco, but the feeling of persecution still weighed on me. I knew I wasn't really safe, just temporarily out of sight. The only thing keeping me focused was the file David Nolan had given. That was the key to understanding what was happening, and perhaps to saving my own life. I locked myself in the room my friend had prepared for me, took the envelope out of the suitcase, and placed it on the bed. For a moment, I hesitated. It was as if opening that file would cross a point of no return. I had already run away from my normal life. I was already being chased by the men in black. But something told me that what I was about to discover could make things even worse. I took a deep breath and opened the envelope. Inside, I found a series of detailed documents full of code, technical notes, and audio recordings. At first glance, it seemed like the kind of material only a programmer would fully understand. But there was something more there. Handwritten notes from David explained simply what those codes represented. A series of hidden servers that were capturing real-time data from millions of people. One of the documents detailed that the company's AI codes, Galleon, not only collected data, but also learned about use. AI seemed to be studying human behaviors in a way that surpassed any other existing technology. At first, the data was seemingly harmless. Purchasing preference, social media usage pattern, even everyday interaction. But as David deepened his research, he and his colleagues discovered that the Galleon, it was sending information to a set of servers that were not included in any official system. The final piece of this puzzle was even more terrifying. According to David, the servers were located in a place completely inaccessible to humans. They were being managed by an extraterrestrial entity. This entity apparently was using the Galleon to study humanity on a global scale, preparing for a kind of silent control. The invasion would not be a war with guns and tanks. It would be a subtle and slow manipulation, controlling our actions and decisions without us realizing. When I finished reading, a chill ran down my spine. This was so much bigger than anything I could have imagined, and now I had proof in my hands. After being out of town for days, I decided I needed to get back to work. I couldn't run away forever. If I wanted to expose what was happening, I would need to use the resources of Gavin Chronicle. Furthermore, he knew that being away for too long would raise suspicion. My plan was simple: go back, act normal, and find a way to publish David's story without attracting the attention of the men in black. When I returned to the newsroom, I was greeted with strange look. It wasn't uncommon for the environment there to be competitive and hostile, but this time it felt different. My colleagues looked at me as if they knew something I didn't. I felt butterflies in my stomach. Had someone told me about me? Had the men in black already made contact with someone in the newsroom? It was impossible to know for sure. My boss, Mr. Thompson called me into his office shortly after I arrived. This was highly unusual. Normally I had to fight for a moment of his attention, but now he seemed eager to talk to me. When I entered, he greeted me with an exaggerated smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good to see you back," he said with a slight strain in his voice. "We have something big for you. An important story that needs to be covered immediately." I didn't know what to expect, but what he said next surprised. He wanted me to cover a political corruption scandal in San Francisco. "This will put our paper in the headline," he said excitedly. But at the same time, something felt wrong. I should have been excited to finally get a big story, but there was something about the way he offered me the assignment that made me suspicious. It seemed too good to be true. As he spoke, I couldn't help but notice something strange about his face. There was a slight bruise around his eye, which he tried to hide with makeup. This took me by surprise. I had never seen Thompson with a mark like that before. What had happened? Inside, my mind was spinning. Was it possible that the men in black had already spoken to him? Were they trying to distract me with this matter? It was clear I was being watched closely, but by whom? Things were unfolding too quickly, and I knew that from that moment on, every decision I made could mean the difference between exposing the truth or falling into a carefully planned trap. Despite the growing discomfort in my work environment, I knew I couldn't walk away from the truth. My boss's offer seemed like an obvious distraction, but the weight of the decision was on my shoulders. Should I accept the story and stay safe, or continue investigating the case that David Nolan had revealed to me, even though I knew it would put me directly in the crosshairs of the men in black? I chose the truth, and that was exactly what they feared. A few days after I returned to work, I received an unexpected message. It was David. He was in an isolated location and wanted to meet me again. "It's urgent," the message said. "They are closer than you think." I felt a chill go up my spine. If David was contacting me, it meant the situation had escalated. We met in an old abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The atmosphere was charged, the sound of the wind whistling through the cracks in the rusty wall. David looked exhausted, more worn out than the last time I saw him. He was on the verge of despair, as if he knew the end was near for him. "I don't have much time," he began as he threw a heavy backpack onto a weather-eaten metal table. Inside there were more documents, hard drives, and what appeared to be an advanced technological device. "They found me, and they are already on my trail. What I've brought here is all that remains. You need to publish this anyway. What is in this material proves that invasion is no longer a possibility. It is a certainty." I didn't know what to say. The weight of responsibility fell on me like a block of cement. David, without hesitation, did something that gave me goosebumps. He placed his hand on my shoulder, looked straight into my eyes, and said, "I'm going to lure them away. You will have enough time to escape with this data and expose everything, but after today I won't survive." His words hit me like a punch. He knew he was sacrificing himself. What disturbed me most was the serenity with which he spoke about his own imminent death. It was as if David had accepted his fate as long as the truth could come out. "I can't let them get you. I didn't run away all this time to let this die with," he added. I wanted to protest, to say there had to be another way, but David had already made his choice. He grabbed the backpack with the materials and ran outside, disappearing into the darkness of the night while I stood there, paralyzed, not knowing if I would see him again. I returned home with David's file, knowing that now, more than ever, I was in the hands of fate. I knew that they, the men in black, would stop at nothing to find me, but what still left me in doubt was the scope of their power. I knew there was something much bigger at play, something that not even David had been able to fully understand. And that night, I realized I was about to discover just how deep this mystery really was. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up to a sound that initially seemed distant, but soon became thunderous. It was a sound like no other I had ever heard. A metallic, almost deafening hum. I ran to the window, my mind still groggy from interrupted sleep. As I looked outside, what I saw made my blood run cold. On the horizon, a huge ship hovered. Its shape was indescribable, as if it were something alive. An organic structure, but at the same time mechanized. It was unlike any spaceship concept I had ever seen in movies or read about in science fiction books. It wasn't just a machine. It seemed to have a life of its own, pulsing slowly as if it were observing the world below. The ship floated above the city, silent and menacing. Lightning streaked across the sky around him, illuminating his silhouette and making his presence even more terrifying. I knew this wasn't a dream. It was real. It was proof that David had been right all along. They were here. Panic took over. If this ship was visible to me, then others must be seeing it too, right? But when I ran out into the street, there was no one outside. The surrounding houses remained silent, as if I were the only one to witness this extraordinary event. How was it possible? Was I hallucinating? Or was that part of their plan? I ran back inside, my heart racing. I knew this wasn't a coincidence. They knew where I was. They knew I had David's files, and now they were sending me a clear message. I was their next target. The question was, what would I do next? With the vision of the alien ship still stuck in my mind, I knew my time was running out. I returned to Gavin Chronicle the next day with the files David had given me. Every second felt like a countdown. I needed to act fast, find a way to publish the story and expose the truth. It was what David had sacrificed his life for me to do. But upon entering the building, a feeling of distrust began to envelop me like a heavy cloud. The mood in the newsroom seemed strangely calm. My colleagues were busy typing furiously on their computers as if nothing out of the ordinary was happening. But I knew it wasn't like that. Something was wrong. The presence of the men in black continued to haunt me mentally. They were behind every suspicious glance, every whispered phone conversation. As soon as I sat down at my desk, my boss, Mr. Thompson, appeared next to it. There was something different about his behavior. He was tense, as if he was hiding something. Before I could say anything, he called me into his office. Nervousness hit me like a blow. I knew that moment was crucial. In his office, Thompson closed the door and turned to me with an oddly calculated expression. "Sit down," he said, his voice low and firm. I sat up, trying to stay calm, but my heart was pounding in my chest. He leaned forward, his eyes scanning me. "I got a call this morning," he said. "An important call. And believe me, it's something we can't ignore." I knew what was coming. I tried to hide my anxiety, but fear began to set in. Thompson sat up straighter in his chair, rubbing his temples with his fingertips, as if he was carefully thinking about his next words. "They know what you have, and they told me what to do with it." The betrayal was like a blow to the stomach. Thompson knew everything, and now he was on their side. "Do you think you can publish this? Do you think you can take on something bigger than any of us?" He got up, walking to the window without looking at me. They gave me a choice. "Either I destroy what you have, or my entire family will pay the price, and yours too." My mind was spinning. I had the files, I had the proof. But now everything seemed to fall apart. Thompson was my boss, someone I trusted, or at least wanted to trust. And now he was forcing me to a crossroads. Keep the story hidden or risk the lives of everyone around me. He walked in front of me and held out his hand. "Give me the files. I can't let this happen. I'm giving you a chance to get out of this alive." But I knew that if I gave up what I had, it would all be over. David's sacrifice would have been in vain. I left Thompson's office dazed, as if in a trance. He gave me no option. I was being forced to destroy everything I had achieved, everything David had fought and died for. It was either that, or risk the lives of my family and those around me. The weight of the decision was overwhelming. Every step I took across the newsroom seemed to increase the pressure in my chest, as if I were walking towards my own end. I sat at my desk, David's files hidden in my backpack, and observed the people around me. They had no idea what was happening. For them, the world remained the same, without changes, without invisible threats. How could I expose something so big, so terrible, without putting everyone in danger? I picked up my phone and called my mom. She answered with that same soft voice that always comforted me, asking how I was. Hearing her almost made me lose my composure. How could I put my own family at risk for a story? What if I failed? They could be the next targets. I knew the men in black had no scruples. They had already killed David's colleague, and were clearly ready to do the same to me. I hung up the phone before saying anything that might worry, but the weight of responsibility seemed to crush me more and more. As a journalist, I have always known that our work can be dangerous, so nothing prepared me for that. I was facing something far beyond what any other journalist could imagine. It was a global, or perhaps universal, conspiracy that involved the future of all humanity. But at the same time, it was deeply personal. They were hunting me, monitoring me, ready to act the moment I tried to expose the truth. I thought about David. I thought about her sacrifice, her calm determination. He knew he would die, but he was willing to give his life so that the truth would be revealed. And now here I was, about to throw it all away. What should I do? The fear was overwhelming. But with it, a growing determination began to emerge. I couldn't let fear win. There was a lot at stake. I stood up from my chair, my fists clenched in anger and frustration. I knew I needed to find a way around Thompson's betrayal. I couldn't trust anyone there. Time was running out, and the only question that was running through my head was, how could I do this without getting caught? Standing at my desk, my fists clenched and my mind racing, I knew I had to make a decision. My mind wavered between two extremes, saving my own life and those of the people I love, or exposing a truth that could change the world. It was as if I was on the edge of a precipice, and any step I took could make me fall into the abyss, but there was no more time for hesitation. The truth was in my hands, and I knew I needed to do something with it. The look on Thompson's face when he asked me for the file never left my head. He was scared, yes, but he had also accepted what was coming. For him, the safest path was obedience, surrender to a greater force. For me, that wasn't enough. David had risked everything to ensure these documents reached, and now it was in my hands to decide their fate. Knowing that Thompson was under the control of the men in black, I could not trust the writing of the Gavin Chronicle to publish the story. They monitored every movement, every word. I needed to think of another strategy, something quick, efficient, but that wouldn't put my family's lives at risk. The plan started to form in my head. I would go home, and from there I would use an anonymous network to spread the material online. I knew this would expose me directly to danger, but it was the only path that seemed viable. With my plan in mind, I left the office with my heart. I wasn't sure I could escape all of this, but the need to do something prevailed. I knew they would be watching my steps, but if I was fast enough, I might have a chance. As I drove home, the fear of being followed grew with every turn. With each car that approached, my body tensed. I knew that the smallest mistake could cost the lives of everyone I loved, but at the same time, the pressure to do what was right kept me focused. I could not simply accept silence and submission, knowing that humanity was about to face something it could not understand. Arriving home, I did everything as quickly as possible. I turned on the computer, connected to the anonymous network, and started uploading David's files to different platforms. I knew that once this was published, there would be no going back. The world would know the truth. The problem was, once I hit the send button, my life would also be marked forever. With the computer screen in front of me and the upload progress bar slowly moving, a sense of urgency washed over me. I knew I was running out of time. Every second seemed to drag on, like the world around me was frozen, as my mind screamed that I needed to finish this as quickly as possible. When the upload finally finished, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. The truth was now out of my hands, handed over to the public, but I knew the consequences were just beginning. I closed the laptop, erased any trace of my actions, and sat for a moment trying to process what I had just done. But before I could take a deep breath, a bright light illuminated the room's window. I ran over to it, and with my heart in my throat, I saw a black car parked on the other side of the street. They had found me. Desperation began to creep in. I knew I didn't have much time. I grabbed a backpack with minimal belongings and went to the back door, trying to stay calm. I needed to disappear before they entered, but as I was getting ready to leave, the phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was calm, unconcerned, asking if I was okay. But inside, I was panicking. Had they already gone to her? Was my family in danger because of what I had done? I said as little as possible, trying to calm her down and reassure her that everything was okay, but the truth was that I didn't know what was going to happen next. When I hung up the phone, I felt the world around me start to fall apart. The men in black were here. I had thrown everything away, risked everything, and now the only thing I could do was run away and hope that the truth I had exposed would have an impact. Before I walked out the back door, I looked back at my home, my life, everything I knew. I was leaving everything behind, not knowing if I would ever return. The only certainty I had was that the world was no longer the same. The ship I had seen, the secrets David had revealed, everything pointed to something much big, something humanity was not yet prepared to face. As I walked away into the darkness of the night, one question tormented me. What would happen now? I had done my part, but would it be enough? The conclusion of this story, despite being tense and full of mystery, makes us reflect on the price of truth and the consequences that arise when we deal with such deep secrets. Should we, faced with an invisible and implacable threat like the men in black, sacrifice our personal safety in the name of revealing such a great truth? And most importantly, how far would you be willing to go to expose something that could change the perception of humanity forever? If it were you in the protagonist's place, what would you do? If you liked this story and want to continue following stories like this, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. Every like and subscription helps us bring you more intriguing and mysterious content. Until next time!